Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I am thrilled to be here with you this evening. I hope that you are winning this week, that you've been very gritty, you've been resilient over time, things are lining up for you. I know many of us are wrapping up the school year, so we're super excited with all of the different updates with our students. I know for me, I've got one that's graduating, crossing over into the next grade group. So lots of excitement there. I wish you all the best and congratulations on successful graduations for students at your school, but also for children that are a part of your home. So with that said, I want to now welcome you into this podcast and I want to make some announcements, okay? First things first, the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on Spotify and social media platforms. And including of social media platforms, I would highly recommend and would encourage you to follow me whenever you get a chance on social media. My Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123. And my TikTok is Dr. India White. So I would love to see you there at some one of those. I would love to see you at some of those platforms. So keep me posted whenever you do connect with me. Now, I also want to invite you to check out my website whenever you get a chance at www.india-white.com for books, blogs, and to schedule me for your next speaking or coaching event. Now, speaking of speaking and coaching events, there are a couple of opportunities where we'll be able to meet together nationwide, various places. I know we've got an amazing Sabbath conference coming up in May in Vegas, so I will be there with y'all over there in Las Vegas. So if you are going to go to that wonderful conference, feel free to reach out. I would love to say hi and to connect with you. Also, I will be attending the FCTM conference in June. Go Florida. Let's do this. Also, the CAMPS conference will be there in July. Also at NCSM will be there in September, and NCTM I'll be there in September. I will also be at ICTM in October. And there are a couple that I have left off that have been getting filled in as we've been going along. So if you're wanting me to connect with you or to reach out regarding the conference or whatever, just send me an email or DM me on one of my social media platforms and we'll make it happen. And also, thank you to everyone for these opportunities. I do not take them lightly. I'm super thrilled to be on those stages and to be with each of you sharing wonderful truths together. Now, I also wanted to remind you guys to check out the Grit Mini Workshop with Grassroots Workshop. Thank you, Robert, and the tribe for that. It's titled How to Harness Grit to Help Students Thrive. So talk with your team about it, see how that can fit for either summer training or PD training for next year. There's all different types of opportunities for that. Now, I want to talk about a topic with you guys just about student progress and overall progress as an educator or as a student or just an individual. And we all deal with different feedback that we get from leaders, loved ones, and whatnot. And so as a result, sometimes that feedback can be a little bit detrimental to our mental health, and it could be a discourager. And I want to talk about that criticism that sometimes we receive from well-meaning people that, they just don't have a clue as to how it makes us feel. So we're going to talk about overcoming criticism through grit. I want to talk about this because criticism is seen as a double-edged sword. It could be seen as something good, but it also could be seen as something that is detrimental. Now, I want to elaborate on criticism. When I'm talking about criticism, I'm talking about people that are giving feedback to students or giving feedback to a loved one to the point that it can either steer them in the right direction if they have like a growth mindset, or it can take them the opposite direction. So I'll reference a couple of things that stood out to me when I thought of criticism. And to be honest, I am not a big fan of negative criticism or people that give criticism and they don't really like maybe they've not really had a voice in that person's life, and they're so quick to jump on, sharing opinions. I feel very conflicted about that, and I'm going to share why in a minute. But let me start with a story. So I was in, I think, sixth grade, and I was playing the saxophone, and it was my first year. I was not good. Okay, I know I wasn't good, but my mom's like, India, whip out that sax and show me what you got. So I'm like super confident. Now listen, this is my first time playing for people outside of the classroom, outside of band class. So I get my saxophone together, I clean it up, and I start playing like the scale, like just regular scale. Well, unfortunately, I did not get the result I thought I was going to get. My mom, she was like, "Oh, is that all you have?" And she like laughed, and that was it. And I was so torn that that one experience affected my confidence as a saxophone player, and it even affected my ability. Like I was achieving a minor in music at the University of Florida, but even trying out for the marching band, I always had that in the back of my mind, like, oh God, I'm like no good because my mom, she said I was no good, and then it just really scarred me. And I don't think she meant to do that. I forgive her. We've moved on. I've played since. I've played in the band, got accepted. It was great. But I say that because how many times do we, unbeknownst to us, we give criticism, especially to like students or to someone that we care about, and it's crushing to them. It could be anything. Criticism can be so cutting if it's not done in the appropriate context, and if there's no relationship, or if the relationship's not deep enough. So for instance, if I'm going to teach a class, that first month of school, I am not trying to give so much constructive feedback to the point that it's crushing these students. I say that because one, I don't think I have the right to at the time because I don't know the kids as well as I should, right? I need to build that relationship with them before they confide in me and trust my opinions. Secondly, instead of being so like some people are so ready to give, they're so gritty to give feedback. And they're so ready to tear down and to find faults and things like that, that they forget the art of building up people through criticism. And so sometimes we can say something that is so innocent. Like for instance, if you see students that are eating 2 Snickers bars for lunch, and you walk past them and you say, "Oh God, you're going to gain 1,000 pounds," not knowing that situation with that student, not knowing if the student, was, challenging themselves to not have Snickers and then that was their reward, not knowing if that was like a birthday present, not knowing if a loved one gave it to them, and or if it reminded them of someone. We don't know the situations, right? And I know I'm using a little simple example of a Snickers bar, but it was so cutting to assume, right, that as an educator, I would have the place to just speak something like that into the student's life. Am I right? Maybe not. Would the student gain 1,000 pounds? Probably not from 2 Snickers bars. What is the point that I was trying to make? Maybe I was trying to tell that student, hey, I think you should be mindful of your health, your eating options, or something like that. But at the same time, was that student asking for that? Was that student wanting that type of feedback from me? Like, what made me think, right, that I had the right to speak into a student's life into that particular area? I'm only saying this because I know I'm using a simple example of a Snickers bar, but we do this, unfortunately, unbeknownst to us, all the time, where we speak things sometimes and it could be more cutting and detrimental, and that's not what we aimed for. So if a student is working in our class, and maybe they're tired, maybe they have their head down, and then we walk past them saying, oh, you pulled another all-nighter on that video game, didn't you? We don't know that that's the situation, and we're cutting the students down, and unfortunately that affects their grit levels. We don't know, and we have to be careful to be protective. And I always try to think, we speak, we should be speaking life. And I think when we criticize, it could be done in a form of almost death. So I always talk about my math teacher because I mean, that's all I have is facts. You know, my math teacher told me, he said, India, you're stupid. You'll never understand calculus and you'll never major in math, right? He told me some other stuff. But I look back at that. Why did he have to say that I was stupid? Um, I didn't understand calculus. And at the time, I had a 4.25 GPA. So now I've got to reason and see like what's going on here. And then he said I would never major in math. Now I'm going to tell you, I went right to University of Florida and majored in math. But when I first started my math major, do you know how loud that man's voice was in my head? You're stupid. You're not going to get this. You're not going to major in math. You can't do this. There were times that my professors would be explaining problems and I could see his face, you know, and I could see the disdain in that man's face. And I had a low sense of confidence as a student, as a college student in math. But what changed it was when I retook calculus, and I got a B that year, but when I retook it at the University of Florida and I aced it, the teacher, for one, she was so approachable. She had such a growth mindset, and she made us attempt math in a way that it was like, oh, come on, we can do this. Let's go. Like, we got this. Like, it was a fun project versus like this daunting, big word problem with all of this stuff and all these equations and all this stuff. Like, it wasn't presented in a way that was overwhelming, but it was very approachable and there was a growth mindset. And she believed that we could do it. She was like coaching us, like mentoring us through the process. Like, it was really neat. So even though she was our teacher, it was just her presentation. She was like, oh yeah, guys, we got this. Come on, let's look at this. Let's look at this problem. See, this is how we're going to start, you know, and it was so approachable that I started believing in myself again. And I started believing that maybe I could obtain a math degree. And I share that. Thanks for letting me get vulnerable with you, because how many of our students, we walk by them and say, oh, you missed that again? Goodness. Or, you know, we say, how did you get a 2 out of 10 on that? You know, we say these little subtle things, unfortunately, and it's hard for our students to overcome that criticism through just everyday, routines and whatnot. They're going to need grit to get through some of that. And unfortunately, some of the criticism that we give, it's well-meaning criticism. It's constructional feedback. It's constructive feedback, right? But we're going to have to teach our students how to not take all criticism so personally that it paralyzes them and it defeats them and shuts them down. Me personally, I have a mixed feelings about criticism and the way it's given. There's nothing wrong with constructive criticism, especially if you've established a healthy relationship with the person that you're giving, constructive feedback to. But if you're just criticizing the everyday little things and you're saying little subtle things here and there to your students or to a loved one or whatever, I would highly recommend, like it says, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, because we don't know where people are. And I think the opposite of criticism is empathy, and really being able to say, how are they doing? Like, for instance, why is that student eating 2 Snickers bars? Getting down to the root of why. If a student can't solve a problem, let's get to the math. If a student can't solve a problem in our class, why? What happened? What happened before me, right? What happened before they entered into my class? Maybe they have some trauma I still have to help walk them through. Maybe I see myself as a helper and as someone to lift them up instead of someone that's just validating that low sense of self-efficacy that they already have and just repeating what their teachers before them have already said. What can I do differently to help our students to overcome criticism through grit? And I think one thing we can do is definitely, when you're helping a student to overcome criticism, it's definitely by helping them to not take it all personally, but to learn from it and to see the bigger message in it. I think that if the criticism is cutting and demeaning, then I just think that's a form of verbal abuse that needs to be addressed in another manner. And for those of us that, our love language is, words of affirmation, I think that's a big deal, because some people can, just really be so sensitive and on the edge if they feel as if everything that teacher is saying is cutting and negative. And so we've got to be very careful when it comes down to how we're giving constructive feedback and constructive criticism to our students, so that we are healing the child and helping the child be whole as a math student or whatnot. So with that said, I want to now also talk about just overall criticism when it comes down to you as a leader. You might be getting criticism, with what you do every day on the job, or you might be getting criticism at the home, and you're trying to process, how am I still going to be able to lead effectively and do everything when I just got a ton of criticism by the way I look, or what I ate today, or the cup of coffee I had, or the way I, solved that problem, the way I answered back that text message, and some of us, we've dealt with criticism, and unfortunately, sometimes it's also led to imposter syndrome. And this is why I think it's imperative that we do what we can to protect children from that, and to also protect ourselves from, chronic amounts of criticism. And I want to share a screen. And I want Psychology Today, I want to give them credit. They said, how to handle criticism. What do you do when you feel like others are rooting for you to fail? And that's the thing right here. This is why criticism hurts so bad, because it seems like the people that are criticizing you, they want you to do bad. They want you to slip up. Or whenever you do your best, they have nothing but the negative to say. You have an idea, they shut it down. They just kill it with their words. I'm telling you, criticism is like they're speaking death if it's not done right, and if it's not done in love, and that's why it hurts so bad, because it's like, especially when it's coming from people that don't have a background with you, that the relationship is shallow. They have not gained that sense of trust when you're vulnerable around them. And so this is one thing we want to look at. So it says that, the key to receiving criticism is to not let it diminish your self-confidence. This is huge, because that's what it's after. And then when someone unfairly criticizes you, reflect on what they're saying and see if it's helpful. And then it says, get clear about who you are, what you are okay with, and what you're still working on. Okay. So now here it says, it's never fair to have someone impose their opinion on you, right, when you haven't asked for it. So you have to be clear about what purpose your critics serve. My thing is this: even if your critics mean well, if you didn't ask for it, and like that relationship is not built, it is going to come off offensive. It just is. So you're going to have to learn to process that by being great and choosing to put up barriers, and choosing to chew the meat, spit out the bones kind of a approach when they come at you with those weapons, the words being used as weapons. Here it says, if you're using drugs and your family is begging you to stop, right, that might be something, that you might need to change. So we understand that, right? But then it says here, but if you know that the things your critics are ranting about don't reflect reality, that's a clue that the criticism is really about them and not you. And this is the part I want to point out as well. Sometimes when people are criticizing you, as a leader, it's not really about you. Maybe it's about them. Maybe there's something that they are dealing with personally. And so maybe they're just reflecting that on you. Believe me, this can happen. It says you deserve to be able to fight your battles and work on your challenges on your own time without the pressure to do things on other people's timelines, right? According to their opinions, right? They're not it's not like they own you, or like they're like a god over you, whatever, right? And it says, when someone unfairly criticizes you, reflecting on them and what they say might not be helpful. So I want to talk about a time where I've had a couple people criticize, just others about their weight gain, or, their intake of, desserts and things like that. And one thing I'm going to say is, if you've ever gone through anything like that, be encouraged. I look at people that deal with things like that, being criticized with, their weight gain, they're up this day, they're down that day. And then they always have the critic that's like, oh, you're too fat, or, oh, you look like you're starving. I've had both. I've had people tell me, and you are fat. Like, and I'm just like, okay, so then how do I take that? I take it as, if, for one, do I know this person? Why would they tell me that? And then I've had people say, oh my gosh, eat something now. You look bone thin. Okay. So when you have both of these coming at you at the same time, then it's up to you to decide, okay, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to utilize this information to move forward? So whenever you have criticism, whether it's weight loss, if it's the intake of how much you eat. I've had people, just say all kinds of different things about their opinions about what you eat, what you shouldn't eat, or you didn't eat enough, right? And I think that at the end of the day, what I have found out with criticism is that it's always going to be there. There's always some way to pull somebody down. There's always some way to critique and to judge people. And one thing that I think people that are overly critical, for you guys that are like, oh, I am kind of overly critical, I want to beat yourself up. But what I would say is, to continue to practice empathy and to continue to see how you can be a lifter upper and not, criticize to the point that you're speaking to a way that could literally drive somebody off the cliff. Like, it could take somebody that could be like the straw that broke the camel's back. I look at people that are unfortunately surrounded by critics, and it's like they're a wilted flower. It never ends. It's like a critic can steal the life out of someone, and that's the last thing we want to do as educators. And that's the last thing that we want to be subjected under, is so much criticism that you could never do anything right. You're never good enough. Just everything, there's always something wrong. But we've got to be mindful of this, especially when we're teaching our children, because we're molding them, and we don't want to be so critical as an educator that the kid can never see the glass half full. They always see that there's something wrong. They can never be gritty enough. They can never get through it because, the teacher just kept telling them that they just can't do it. The problem's too hard for them. They just don't know what they're doing, or they just never finish their assignment. Like, those kids can hear what we say. We have to just be very mindful of that. Making sure that we're not going to be like that negative person, but instead that we'll have a growth mindset. And the thing about being a critic sometimes is that being critical, it kind of does come from a fixed mindset, because people, it's like, they're like, this is it. Like, I'm the judge. Like, when we become critical, it's almost like we put ourselves on like a judging platform, to where we are the law. And it is what it is. This is what I see. This is the negative. I'm judging you, and that's it. You did not make the cut. You're not good enough. And it's a horrible feeling to be connected to a critic. It really is. And so I want to encourage all of us in here to do what we can to continue to support students so that they're not being subjected to a critical classroom environment. But I also want to say, to say the same, that you as an educator, you as a leader, you as a loved one, you in a relationship, whatever, that you are doing all that you can with self-care, including putting appropriate barriers around anyone that would try to criticize you, to the point that you go into like a depression or anxiety, or you just lose hope. And the way you do that is by remaining resilient and choosing to believe in yourself no matter what anybody else said, and remaining gritty despite the negative feedback and the negative nagging that you have been getting. And it talks about how to respond to unfair criticism. So the first thing is, you've got to be clear about who you are so that that person will not break you down. Some people, they get a joy out of destroying other people. Like, they just want to see you crush and just be done with it. They just don't like you so much that they'll do what they can to criticize. And so she speaks here. She says, sometimes boundaries in place with people in your life and repeatedly ask them to be more respectful of your choices. This is key. You have to. And then it says, when you're constantly being unfairly criticized, this can make you angry. In this guy's case, his mother's his mother's criticism was unfair and unhelpful, unjust because it was constant and offensive. It was incorrect because it was inaccurate. So some things that she said you can do: create an internal calm, remain calm and centered. So sometimes people will criticize you because they want a reaction out of you. So you've got to be the bigger person. And then it says, you know, it can fuel anger. So be aware of how criticism makes you feel, because it does bring up feelings of inadequacy. So then she says here, keep going, respond, don't react. And if you can't get to a place, where you cannot respond, then I would probably walk away. And like here, he says, in Alan's case, a boundary sounds like, I've heard this all before. I would like to talk about something else. If you continue to bring this up, I will finish my dinner at home. So finding ways to walk away from those that are very critical. And then, of course, it says, recap the words back to your critic. So refrain from pressuring yourself by having the perfect response, because, right, there is nothing you can do to please a critic. Remember, there is nothing you can do to please somebody that is critical of you. And it says, you can start by saying, I want to be sure that I heard you correctly, and then focus on the objective. Then it says here, open up the discussion, right? So don't be overly emotional. And so they have an example here. I can see how you might get that idea, but allow me to tell you my thoughts. That's good, but I'm going to be honest. If somebody's a critic, they probably don't care, right? They don't care about your thoughts. And so that was a really cool article that it talked about some ways that you could fight criticism. And I'm saying this because I want you as a leader to be able to fight criticism, but at the same time, I also want you to be mindful of how your students feel whenever you're giving constructive feedback. We have got to learn as educators how to give constructive feedback in a way that is cultivating a growth mindset and helping students to be gritty. There's something to be said when you can take your response, say a student misses a question on your math quiz, and instead of saying, nope, you got that wrong, just like you got the last one wrong, or nope, you're just not getting this, you just don't got it. Instead of saying that, you could say, I see where your thought process was. Now let's walk through this and let me explain where you could have done differently. Being gentle with your words and gentle with your feedback is key, because our children are being crushed, bombarded by criticism every day. And the last thing we want to do is to be contributors of that. And yes, we need growth mindset. Yes, we need to be able to talk about misconceptions and things like that, but we've got to do it in love. And if you're a leader out here and you're dealing with criticism, whether it's at home, at school, with friends, with other teachers, with whatever, I just want to encourage you as well, and just say that you are better and bigger than what you are being made out to be through the critics, and that you can also overcome this through a growth mindset. One weakness that we have when people criticize is we take it personally and we internalize it and we think it's a part of our identity. When a critic criticizes you, their main goal is to diminish you, to cause shame, to put you down, to make you feel like they're better than you, like they're lords over you. And that is not your purpose in life. That is not a part of your destiny. And so the best way that you can deal with it is to really by having a strong sense of confidence where you know who you are, and you take the critics with a grain of salt. Even if it's a loved one that has spoken in your life for years, take it with a grain of salt. Don't take it personal. Learn to forgive. Chew the meat, spit out the bones, and continue to move forward through grit, through resilience. Being resilient enough in your mindset to say, okay, I heard this. This is how it made me feel. But I'm bigger than that, and I'm going to bounce back. Now, listen. If you are dealing with criticism as a leader, and it's to the point that it's toxic and it is tearing you down as a person, learn how to have appropriate boundaries and learn when to walk away. So not everybody deserves to be in your life. Not everybody deserves to collaborate with you. Not everyone deserves your love and your awesomeness. And, whether that's family, whether that's, whatever area you're in, you have to understand that your time is valuable and you have worth. And if people cannot see your worth, then you're going to have to do some introspection and figure out what your next steps are. But the last thing you want to do is to succumb to the critic and to have your whole being crushed because the person just doesn't know how to love you, or they just don't know how to see the good in you, which I think everybody deserves to have a surface level of respect and dignity as a human. And so, to me, it's like if you're dealing with the critic as a leader, you don't have time for that if it's not constructive criticism. Learn how to put up boundaries. Learn how to tell people, thank you so much for that information. And, let's open this conversation. Let's see how we can take it. But if it's to the point that it's detrimental and it's taking you to a place, a dark, dark place, then you need to learn how to unplug from that effectively and connect yourself to people that love you and to people that will cheer you on as you continue to move forward. So with that said, I just wanted to come in here and just keep it real. And the reason why is I know we're ending the school year. There's going to be a lot of criticism being thrown out. There's going to be a lot of job, situations, transfers, promotions, different things. And so I just wanted to encourage every educator on here and say that you are amazing despite what you have heard, what you are going through. And every student is phenomenal, no matter what classes they pass, what classes they have to retake, whatever. They are all fantastic. And so I just want to be out here and say, continue to move forward through grit. Keep your great resilience in time. Take that criticism, recycle it as growth and opportunity to grow. Don't take it personally to the point that it is consuming you with guilt and shame or deflecting some type of horrible status upon you. Instead, use it as a learning opportunity and as an area to grow, and then put up your boundaries. If the people do not respect you as a person, then you know what you need to do. You need to cut ties, or you need to limit the time that they have with you, because you are worthy of love and you're worthy to be validated and to be approved. So I hope that all of you will go into these future months in the summer, whatnot, feeling validated, feeling loved, and surrounded by people who will only speak life to you, that will only lift you up, and through constructive feedback, be able to help you blossom, but in a way that is through growth mindset and through really speaking life to you. So with that said, thanks so much for joining me on this grit, on the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. I am super thrilled to be with y'all. Please, please, please don't be a stranger. Feel free to connect with me. You can connect with me on all of my different platforms. Check out my website, www.india-white.com, to schedule me for various events, or to check out my blogs or books or different speaking events. I also, speaking of blogs and different events, I have on my website, I've created different Facebook groups for each of you. So I have a Facebook group for administrators, a Grit Workbook Facebook group for administrators. I have a Grit Workbook Facebook group for teachers, a Grit Workbook Facebook group for students, a Grit Workbook Facebook group for leaders, and a Grit Workbook Facebook group for parents. And with that said, I also wanted to let you guys know that I am finally doing the finished touches of the Grit Workbook for parents. So if you're a parent out here and you're wanting to know more about grit, check out my website, www.india-white.com, and go grab you a copy of the Grit Workbook for parents, and send me a DM or an email at india.white.123@gmail.com, so that I can help you through your journey of grit. And so with that said, I hope to see you guys at several conferences that we have coming up, and stay amazing because you are awesome. Also, please make sure you check me out on social media. I'll put my little links up there again. You've got the Facebook all the way to TikTok over there. So make sure you check me out whenever you get a chance. And so with that said, thank you so much for joining me on the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. And until next time, stay gritty. See ya.